Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Hieu. Hieu is a graduate in our part-time MBA class of 2025, and he and I recently connected to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden, how he figured out the completion timeline for his part-time MBA program, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Hieu. Hieu, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here, Brett.
Well, it's great to see you. It's great to talk with you. How's everything going? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just got back from spending about a month in Brazil. One of my good friends got married there, and I took the opportunity to surf, explore, and enjoy some time off. I graduated in December of 24, and my previous role, wrapped up in January 25. So right now, I'm experiencing a level of freedom I haven't had in a long time. And so I'm currently staying with my mom in Williamsburg, Virginia. Small town, but plenty of golf courses. So I've been playing a lot. And so now that I'm back in the States, however, I've been actively applying for jobs and going through a few interview processes. So fingers crossed that something exciting pans out.
Well, good luck, and please let me know if I can help in any way. You know how people are done with the part-time program is they say, "Well, I just spent a month in Brazil, hanging out, and I'm now playing a lot of golf." That's how you know people have finished the part-time program.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you for taking time to come on the podcast. And our listeners will know we've been trying to catch up with some folks who finished the part-time program just to talk about your experience. You're part of the inaugural class, obviously one of the first graduates from the program finishing in December. We had about 8-9 students finish up in December. We'll have a larger group finish up in May. I trust, Hieu, you will be down in Charlottesville in May for graduation.
I definitely will be. And my parents will be very excited to see me walk that stage. So
that's awesome. And I mean, I just think about the journey for you and your classmates, right? The first class of part-time MBA students here, the pioneers. We announced the program in the summer of 2021. You started in August of 2022, and now here you are. To me, it feels like a long time, but maybe to you, it doesn't feel that long at all because you've been really busy.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how quick time flies. But I wouldn't have traded this time doing this part-time with the Darden program for anything else, even though it was a very rigorous journey. But we learned so many great and awesome things.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about you and your background. Tell us about you.
Yeah, so I'm originally from San Jose, California, born and raised. I did my bachelor's at UC Santa Barbara. I'm the eldest of three, and my parents were originally from Vietnam. And so growing up, I was always, into gaming, sports, and tech. And in community college, I was the president of my school's business club, which sort of sparked my initial interest in business and sort of that field. But I also took a sociology class in community college that got me interested and involved in politics. And so I did my 2 years in community college, and that's when I finally transferred to UC Santa Barbara. And I had planned to double major in economics since our school didn't have a business major, and in political science. But then I was fortunate to have been elected student body president at UCSB, which was sort of a major turning point in my life. I got heavily involved in advocacy and policy work and started seeing a potential future in politics. And I was sort of one of those kids that even considered running for office one day, and that was sort of what I had set as a goal in mind. But after graduating, I was still interested in tech and business. But also had this interest in politics and saw a sort of career path there. But I knew I wanted to live in DC. And so I was thinking of finding a way to sort of bridge the two sort of interests together, and found an opportunity joining a startup for a SaaS company that provided software solutions for lobbying teams to make their advocacy and lobbying efforts more effective. It's probably the most DC sounding startup imaginable. But that's where I worked for a short period of time. But sort of being there and sort of being in the city, I realized that I wanted to make a bigger impact, and so I moved more directly into a policy role. Ended up finding myself working in sort of the climate change, clean energy sector. First at a nonprofit called Sierra Club, where I was working on several electric vehicle initiatives to sort of help grow the market, educate consumers about EVs, and to impact market growth in that way. And eventually, I was there for about 4 years, and that led me to join the Biden administration. Got a call one day, or an email, so to speak, asking if I was interested in serving, and I could not have passed that opportunity up and expressed that I was interested, and went through a round of interviews. And so in January of 2023, I was appointed, received a presidential appointment to join the administration, where I worked as a senior advisor over at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, advising the agency's chief of staff and supporting him, as well as Administrator Michael Regan, who's the head of EPA and also was a member of the president's cabinet. And to go back to what you were saying, in August of 22, also decided to join the DARTA inaugural part-time MBA cohort. And so I was sort of balancing work, school, and all those fun things.
Well, thank you for sharing all that, Hieu. And you didn't even mention that you're a Lakers fan. I figured that would come up at some point.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that it's an exciting time to be a Lakers fan. Really have to thank a guy named Nico Harrison for everything he's done for us. So,
all right, yes, very very interesting times if you are a Los Angeles Lakers fan. So, talk to us a little bit more about your interest in pursuing an MBA. How did you realize? I mean, obviously you've done this policy work, EPA, et cetera. But how did you decide an MBA was the right next step for you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, always had that interest in business, but my career in sort of policy and climate was sort of taken off pretty quickly, at least for someone my age at the time. And sort of the pathway that I saw for myself was to go to law school, not because I had a strong passion to be a lawyer, but I always saw it as a stepping stone to maybe running for office one day. But when I realized I actually didn't want to pursue a career in politics anymore, I had to sort of reassess what my long-term goals were. And what I really wanted was to actually be an executive one day, and someone who makes strategic decisions, helps build companies and make an impact, particularly in the private sector. And so by process of elimination, going the MBA route was the right step for me. What was sort of interesting in this journey was that I had gotten as far as taking the LSAT a couple times, and so I had a score on the books. But when I was doing research into MBA programs, saw that there were a few schools, including Darden, that accepted LSAT scores. And I remember that I remember going through the process where I was thinking, well, I could maybe take the GRE or GMAT, but I have to study for possibly another year and retake that, or just submit my application now. I remember at the time, I think I applied, and I think the last round, or the sort of like the additional round, I think everything had already been wrapped up at that point in time. But when I was looking into Darden, one of the things that really stood out to me was sort of the focus on building good, responsible leaders. And that sort of messaging really resonated with me. And so when I was going through the interview process, meeting with the admissions folks like yourself, it was clear as day this is where I wanted to be. So,
what was it like to be part of the first class of part-time MBA students?
Yeah, it was sort of a little daunting going in, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. There were, I felt like myself and a lot of my peers, there were tons of question marks. But I would say that the school and the program did a very good job from day one in sort of creating a very, very structured program that gave me lots of confidence in the decision that I made to attend this school, and also to be part of the inaugural cohort. And I think that was really validated with our first week of residency when I got to experience firsthand the quality of the teachers, experience the rigors of the curriculum, and to leave that first week being mind blown about, wow, this is a really awesome learning experience that I probably wouldn't have gotten elsewhere. So that was step one. I think step two was sort of the opportunity to sort of shape and build this program for the next generation of part-time students. And that was also part of a draw for me when I was deciding where to go, was sort of, I think there are people that, want to go places where there's already, lots of structure, institutional history behind it. But I think part of the draw for me coming to Darden was to really help shape this program. And I think the school has done a really good job in taking feedback and input from our class about what's working, what can be improved, and things have been changing over the past couple of years, and so it's sort of been like a very cooperative partnership between the first class students, the inaugural cohort of students, with the school and with the program team to sort of build this to be one of the most recognizable part-time programs in the world.
Yeah, that's been one of the consistent mantras from your classmates as we've had you on the podcast, this idea of being partners with the program team, with the school, as we articulate the part-time MBA experience and really build out what the full part-time MBA experience looks like here. Because when you matriculated, obviously no part-time student had taken a core class yet.
Yep.
No part-time MBA student had taken electives yet. No part-time MBA student had gone through any kind of recruiting experience or, ultimately securing a role working with our career team on that. So there was a lot of, I'd say not necessarily unknowns, but just like we had an outline of what these things might look like, but they weren't the sort of thing where you could say, well, let's have you talk to these 3 or 4 students about their experience. That just didn't exist at that time. Nature of being the pioneers.
Yeah.
Well, we've had your learning team here on the podcast before, an episode. If folks want to go back and listen to that, it's always fun to talk about how the teams work together. But for you, what was the adjustment process to doing work and life and school all at the same time as a part-time MBA student?
Yeah. So it was intense to start, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat that part. But what I will say is that because the curriculum and the case study method, in particular, it's as I said before, it's challenging, but it's very, very dynamic, and it's a very interactive way of learning. So even though you have these classes twice a week for a few hours after work, it went by very fast because of how interactive and engaging the case study is. And so you're thrown into real life business problems, and you have to debate, defend, and adapt your viewpoints in front of your classmates and with your professor. And it's really humbling because you quickly realize there's never just one right answer, especially if you're in more of the qualitative classes. But it also really helps to develop strong decision-making skills, which is something you need in leadership, whether it's in business, government, or startups. And so for me, the case study method really helped make the experience very, very enjoyable, as opposed to this is a chore that I have to do and sit in class for 2 or 3 hours twice a week after I'd already completed a work day. So I think that was part of the adjustment, but it was an adjustment that was very rewarding because of the way that Darden approaches academics and how it teaches its business concepts. So.
How do you explain the case method to folks who don't know much about it? Because there's a lot of people when we say our case method in school, they're like, "That sounds interesting. What is that?" So how do you explain that to folks?
Yeah, so the best way I would describe it is that in a traditional curriculum, learning concepts and theories are primarily led by the faculty member, professor, teacher, and it's very presentation sort of heavy. So, think back to my days in undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, where I was sitting in a 500 person lecture hall learning calculus or something, right? And I just had to sit there, take notes. And when you're in such a large setting, you don't really have opportunities to really ask questions because there's so many students in the class, and it's not a very engaging type of learning or teaching. And as I said before, it's sort of just the professor would just kind of click through the slides, and you just have to rapidly take notes and then just try to memorize everything and then get ready for your midterms and your final exam. The case study method is like the complete opposite of that, where in my experience, it felt more like the professor served more as the facilitator, and the students would teach each other, and the professors would come to class with um, sort of core principles and guiding questions to sort of keep us on track to help learn the right concepts and the right theories and get to the right answers, or at least on track to the right answers. And so it's much more engaging. It's much more interactive. Um, but it's also very prep heavy. So you have to come to class very prepared, knowing the materials beforehand. So it's not, as I said before, compared to traditional style where you're sort of learning in class, taking notes. Here, a lot of the learning is done at home and prepping for the cases that will be discussed inside the classroom. So that's the best way I would describe it.
Yeah, and class becomes an opportunity for you to test your understanding, see if you really kind of know what you think you know, which I think can be hard for folks. If you think about that traditional learning model, how do you really know what you've learned? You really don't find that out until maybe an exam or a test. You're kind of having that assessment as you go through each case discussion. Each class is a great opportunity for you to check in with what you think you know and what you've learned.
Right, exactly. Or when you get cold called.
Yes, for those of you who are less familiar with what a cold call is, you get called on even if you don't raise your hand. That does happen here at Darden, and that's part of the experience. And sort of Hugh's point, the importance of being prepared for class is kind of the social contract of everything here. You think about what the case method requires. It requires everybody to show up prepared because that's how you can have the best possible discussion. And I don't know, Hugh, in my experience, just talking with students, they feel like an obligation not only to the faculty member but kind of to each other to be prepared. Obviously, sometimes work gets busy and things may keep you from being as prepared as you like. But from a class standpoint, it's important to show up prepared because that's really for everyone's benefit.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And a lot of the work is done within your learning teams. And so there's sort of accountability built into that, and not wanting to let your learning team members down. But also to your point, Brett, the quality of the discussions are much, much higher, much more insightful, and much more engaging when people do come prepared, and having been caught up and read up on the materials that were assigned ahead of time. And it just, again, we're paying tuition, and so it makes sense to be able to dive in that way. So.
Well, Hugh, obviously a lot happens over 2.5 years. Obviously, you completed the program in 28 months, which is the fastest completion timeline. How did you decide you wanted to finish the program in 28 months? How did that work out?
Yeah, so there were a few logistical considerations as well as sort of the considerations about my job. So as sort of a political appointee in the administration, my job sort of hinges a lot on presidential transitions. And so I sort of wanted to set myself up in a way where I would graduate at the earliest timeline, which was right after the results of the election in November. And so when I saw that December was the earliest I could graduate, it felt that the timing would be very good in terms of if I had to go and look for a job, and that having that degree around that time would be very helpful in my pursuit of my next opportunity. The second is sort of I wanted some freedom back in my life. So, and I thought to myself, if I had just pushed myself a little further and ramp up, especially when you come elective time, you have the opportunity to take more than the 2 courses per quarter that are required in the core curriculum. And so I thought to myself, let's just push myself and get this done much quicker, so that I have some more freedom in my life, rather than opposed to sort of extending it further. So
Yeah, it's not a declaration that you have to make when you start the program. It's something that you kind of work through as you go through the program, how fast you want to finish. You have 60 credits, what's required. You do 34 and a half credits through the core. Then you hit that elective period. You got 17 electives, 25 and a half credits left to finish. Uh, Hugh, in this program, students really typically take about two classes at a time through the core. And to finish in 28 months, you oftentimes are having to take three electives. You may have had the occasional elective quarter where you may have had more than that. I don't know. So what was that adjustment like going from two to maybe three or more classes in a particular quarter?
yeah, so it was quite the adjustment. As you mentioned, I had to ramp up to three classes per quarter, and in some cases, I had to do four classes per quarter. I also had to do a J term as well. So when you think of it in that regard, my personal bandwidth got stretched even more thin. But I had a very supportive boss and supervisor, and he was always very supportive of me getting the MBA. It was one of the things that I mentioned up front when I was in my final interview round, and he sort of mentioned to me that we have several folks here that are currently working full time and are doing school part time, and that's something that we support. And so, I think getting that buy-in from my boss was very critical in helping to make this happen. And so I had sort of flexibilities in that regard, understanding from my employer that, like, after 5 o'clock, I have to commute to Roslyn, and that I would sort of be out of pocket for 2 to 3 hours during the evening. But yeah, my bandwidth got stretched, but sometimes you just have to get it done, and that was the mindset that I had. But I think part of it also goes back to like interest, and when you're taking electives, obviously you've got the freedom to choose the sort of classes you want to take, and it didn't feel like I was taking four classes sometimes because, again, I felt very I always looked forward to some of those classes, and it helped to make things easier when you're always taking things that you're interested in, and then you kind of forget about like being stretched that way. So
Yeah, I can appreciate that. It's nice to be able to choose your classes. Obviously, the core, your classes are set for you. You're not really registering for classes during the first 18 months of the part-time MBA program as you're going through that core curriculum with the group of people you started with. So 65, 70 or so students in a cohort here. You're all moving through that core curriculum together. But then when you hit the elective period, you get to choose your classes, a bit more control over your schedule as well. Part-time MBA electives are offered on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings just to give you a little bit more choice. You also have the option of taking executive MBA electives if you can make that schedule work. Did you take any executive MBA electives?
I did. And I think that's also one of the cool parts of being part of the part-time program, and how Darden has now structured some of their courses, is that it's now sort of cross-cutting across all the different professional degrees. So, for example, during J term, I took a CEO leadership class with Dean Beardsley during the J term, and it was with full-time students, it was with executive MBA students, and it was with part-time students. And it was really cool to sort of be in a different classroom with different peers and learn from each other that way. But yeah, also took some executive classes, and also adjusting to sort of that schedule and routine was sort of interesting. But I really did like their model, and it kind of added some variance to my schedule in terms of they would do sort of the weekly online meetings, but then there would be the in-person weekend, sort of twice a week or twice a weekend. I think every 1.5 months or something like that. So
Yeah, the way it works on the executive MBA side, there's, weekend residencies 1 weekend per month. So in a 2 month quarter, you can expect to have 2 weekend residencies. You'll have online class as well, similar to the part-time program. It's hybrid, so in-person and virtual components. So if you're taking an executive MBA elective, you should expect to have online class 1 night during the week, and also you would have in-person classes on at least one of the days of the weekend residency, if not 2 days. The way that the weekend residencies are structured for executive MBA students during the elective period, there's some electives that meet only on Friday. There's some electives that meet on Saturday and Sunday morning, and there's some electives that meet on Saturday and Sunday afternoon. So for the executive MBA students, even a little bit more schedule flexibility during that elective period. So it is, to your point, Hugh, it's nice to be able to sort of toggle across these programs. It gives you a more elective choice. I think you do the math, it's probably somewhere between, it's typically 3 to 4 electives offered on the part-time MBA schedule in a given quarter, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 offered on the executive MBA schedule in a given quarter. So 13, 14 electives to choose from, not to mention potentially asynchronous electives where you take the sort of online class. There's also independent studies, lots of different ways to earn elective credit here. So
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I really loved the executive classes because, the executive students are, much further along the career journey than we are, or sort of our average cohort class size in the part-time program. And it was it was a lot of learning from people who are director level, VP level, in the classroom with you, and getting their perspective. I thought that was such a great value add to sort of be in those sort of settings.
well, I'll maybe ask you an impossible question here, but do you have a favorite memory from the program, something that really stands out to you as you reflect on the time you spent in Darden's part-time program?
Yeah, I do. I would say residency always sticks out the most with me. I think that's been the most engaging, most memorable week. And I think in particular, the second week, or our second residency, was probably the most memorable one for me. Because if I felt like with the first residency, it was a lot of, oh shoot, I'm now here with 60 students. I don't really know anyone yet. So there was sort of like that initial awkwardness where no one had really uh, gotten to become close with each other quite yet. By the second residency, it was like we all knew each other. We're all friends with each other. Everything felt very normal. We're all hanging out. But I think what really stood out to me was sort of some of the obstacle challenges we had to do, and it was like a physical obstacle course. And I remember having to do a challenge with one of my learning teammates, Kat, where we were sort of it was sort of like a ladder obstacle challenge where you have or you're paired up with another person, and you have to scale this giant wooden ladder, and the steps in between the ladder are very very large, and so and you're sort of strapped on, and you sort of have to figure out how to climb up and scale to the top end to help each other up. And I thought that was such a fun activity, and that's what sticks out to me in terms of like you know being together in person with the entire cohort, now being like really good friends with each other, having that connectivity, having like a much more sort of different way of learning through these obstacle challenges as part of that residency was really fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. Having been around, first week long residency in Charlottesville a few times now, and having seen it, the second residency as well. You're right that the sort of energy is a little bit different between the two. You can tell the second residency people are much more settled in the program. They're 18 months in. They really know each other. They have that sort of class spirit because they've really gone through a lot of class to that point, right? They've taken the entire core curriculum together over a year and a half. And I love both of them. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy both parts of it. But that first week, everybody's so new, right? They're still figuring things out. And then that second week long residency, everybody's so settled. And it's nice to have that time together because, in this program, the flexibility, as you mentioned, really comes in that elective period. And so this is kind of the last cohort experience before people move into that sort of more customizable portion of the program. And it's nice to have that time together as a group.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I still remember at y'all's classes at celebration at King Family Vineyard there in Charlottesville, some big dance party broke out in the midst of it.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, yes. So
That's
that was a lot of fun that evening, and it was great to see y'all having fun together as a class. One of the questions we were launching the part-time program is about how do we think the part-time students are going to connect with each other? Is there going to be a sense of community? Are they where they want to engage both in class and outside of class? And I think y'all proven that there's absolutely a community here.
yeah.
Well, Hugh, I'm curious how obviously you're a period of transition here. You're trying to think about what's next for you. What are some of the things that are on your mind as you think about what's to come?
Mm. Yeah. So, I think for me, I think the next step is to go back into the tech space. So I've been applying for jobs in that field. Have had a few interviews, so just waiting to hear back. So again, fingers crossed. And then from there, I think I'm hoping to end up in New York City. So I consider myself a nomad for the time being, and so I've been living in DC for the past 5 or 6 years now. Recently, just moved out of my apartment where I'm now with my mom, and so sort of the next role that I'm looking for is sort of New York based, and so want to park there for the next few years. But that's sort of what's next for me, sort of getting that next job. So.
I'm curious, how do you think about the impact of your time at Darden? Maybe a little bit too early to assess the full scope, but when you think about who you were before you started the program to who you are now, what would you say the impact has been?
Yeah. So I think, when I think about sort of my goal of one day potentially becoming an executive, um, I think Darden has really helped me level up as a leader. Um, it's given me the tools to evaluate, businesses, for example, with some of the courses with McBrady. It's given me the ability to think more strategically, um, not just from a business context, but from a interpersonal work relationship context through a lot of the leading organization classes when you're taught how to be more strategic as a manager and as a leader in managing interpersonal relationships within the workplace. Um, and I think lastly, it's given me the tool to help build something more meaningful. So whether that's maybe one day launching a climate tech startup, for example, the network has been incredibly valuable. I've met tons of really awesome alumni who, by the way, always want to connect with students, and they've been such an awesome, valuable network to sort of lean on, both in terms of wanting to better understand like what their roles are at at some of the target companies that you're interested in recruiting for. They've also been great mentors, and so that network has been awesome. But also, I've met tons of really awesome business leaders because of what Darden has brought together. I sort of mentioned the CEO leadership class that I took with Dean Beardsley, and as part of that class, he brought a bunch of CEOs to come sort of teach during each day of that week long course. And so I think of those three things in terms of what impact the program has made on me, and how I want to aspire to sort of build something valuable in the future that will have a positive impact for society. So.
Yeah, make no small plans. I appreciate that. So, last question for you, Hugh. we'll let you get out of here. What advice would you have for our prospective students as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, it's a great question. Uh, uh, you know, I think the most important thing is don't underestimate the value of your classmates, and that some of the best learning happens outside the classroom. So, so if you decide to go on the MBA journey, I think that's my biggest piece of advice. When I think about when I look at our cohort specifically, there's been tons of job transitions. I would say maybe 20% to maybe a third of the class have switched jobs, or want, and a little more than that want to switch jobs. And we've got awesome classmates who work at a lot of the target companies that our classmates who want to switch, who have switched, are working for. And so don't underestimate the value of what your current classmates have. And so I think part of that is just being very intentional about, just building relations and getting to know people outside the classroom a little more. And then finally, I would just say, just come in with an open mind. Like, you might come in with one career plan and leave with completely different vision for your future, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I love that. We have the same conversation on Experience Darden, which is more focused on the full-time MBA program. And the consistent advice there around career goals and career interests is, have a plan, but hold it loosely, right? Be open to, what may arise as you go through the program. All things, you can get all sparks from all kinds of directions, right? Class, the people you're meeting. One of the real benefits of doing a part-time program or any kind of working professional program is the fact that you're around people who are all working, and they may be working at target companies, to your point, Hugh. And I love the point that you made about the value of the relationships that you're building. Sometimes when we talk to prospective students, it's clear that they're really focused on the school part of it, right? They're thinking about what's happening in class and, getting an MBA, but the full value of the experience is also in the relationships that you cultivate. And it takes time. You got to be intentional about that. You got to value that. You got to put energy towards it.
Absolutely. And as we said before, at least from my experience with the case study method, a lot of the learning is done from your peers. And I think that is amplified if you build better relationships with each other. And so, and also it just makes the program experience much more enjoyable. And I think we as a cohort were very effective. And that's to what we were talking about earlier, between the difference between the first residency and the second residency, is that, we took sort of initiative to sort of start programming these sort of happy hours outside of the class after it was over, to grab a drink or something nearby. And as a result of that, you saw our second residency was much more looser in terms of our interactions with each other. And then we were now dancing at the vineyard together. So
That was great. It was a true highlight, and obviously we're so happy for you and your classmates. It's a wonderful, wonderful time. That May graduation will be here before you know it, and a truly historic day. One of the nice things of being in the first class is, like, history just keeps happening to you, right? The first class to finish the core curriculum, the first class to have LR2, the first class to go through electives, and of course the first class to graduate. So congratulations to you, and can't wait to see you in Charlottesville in May.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brett. I look forward to seeing you there in May as well. And thanks for having me on.
And that was my conversation with Hieu, a recent graduate in our part-time MBA class of 2025. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's ExecMBA@darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.